I have Pastor Greg Schuringa from First Waupun with us this week. I forgot to hit record on our first conversation, so we're taking it again. Pastor Greg, thanks for taking extra time this week to talk with us, and I
You're very
apologize for
welcome.
that.
I must have not said the right things. It wasn't meant to be.
Yeah,
I'll try to do better.
and we
Even though you
did.
said I did a good job,
You did great,
but
and we had been talking, and I think we will talk again about how the battle belongs to the Lord. It's the Lord's work. And so I didn't hit record the first time, and it was the Lord's will for whatever reason. The way we phrase things here is going to be better for His kingdom, I guess. But you're one of the newest guys in the classes, if not the newest. So take a couple minutes to introduce yourself
yeah.
to the masses who don't know Greg Schuringa.
So yeah, again, hi there. I'm Greg Schuringa. Came to this Classis and to First CRC in Waupun just in June. I have a wonderful wife named Sarah who came with me, which was nice of her to do. I have 4 daughters, so very blessed in that way too, with my kids. 2 of them are in college. One a senior at Trinity Christian College in Palos Heights, and one a freshman at Trinity. My oldest is engaged to be married, and she'll be married in June, the Lord willing. So that's an exciting thing and a big deal for our family, of course. And we love the young man that proposed to her, and he did it right. He talked to me first. So she's studying social work. This is her last year, and um, doing a minor in theology. And from what I've been able to gather from her and other people, the theology department at Trinity, my dad also went there, actually. He's a retired CRC pastor. But the theology department is just excellent. And everything else about Trinity, we've been really pleased about as parents, too. Hannah, my youngest, is in the speech language pathology program, and she really enjoys athletics too, and is playing especially basketball. I mean, well, she's playing volleyball and basketball. Basketball is kind of her main sport, and that's initially the conversation she had. But she's also playing volleyball and enjoying that. And we're a little ways away um, from about 3 hours, but we try to find times that maybe we can sneak down there, catch a game. If we can't see it in person, there's live stream. That's through COVID,
Yeah.
almost anything is available through video and live stream, so that's handy. Before coming here, I was for just shy of 19 years in the west suburbs of Chicago. Um, Elmhurst Faith CRC in Elmhurst. I was ordained in late 2002 and started there as the associate pastor. I worked there with Reverend Lee Koning for about 7 years. He retired in 2009. The church put a transition team together. What are the next steps? Looking at our mission, vision, all that stuff. Called me to be the senior pastor. I accepted, and that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years through the end of May, and then started here on June 1st. So really, this is just, I was in 2 different roles at Faith, but just one other church before coming here. Yeah.
We've got a lot of. We made this connection the first take. A lot of things in common. Us guys, Drew Zalstra and I here in Oostburg, and you. We both have
Yeah.
only daughters. He has two
Okay.
daughters. I have 2 daughters. You have 4 daughters. So
Yeah.
you got the leg up on me so far. I don't know. You
Got more
spoke.
coming?
We'll see, Lord willing. But you spoke very kindly of the addition of a son-in-law. I don't know if I'm ready. That
Oh,
terrifies me. That's a long way away. But
no, I mean, when I thought about it when they were younger, you know, and I think that's how it goes with kids. It's like, oh man, I just want to keep them,
yeah, right.
and I still feel that sometimes, all with me in the house forever. But there is sort of a natural
Yeah,
progression. It doesn't all happen at once. And yeah, you know, you don't want them to stay with you forever in the house.
Yeah.
You want them to find someone. And so now that this is coming and has happened, I wouldn't have known this 10, 15 years ago, but
Sure.
getting to know him, I'm so happy for her.
Yeah.
And when you see how happy they are, yeah. And so he's, he goes to the University of Michigan. He's finishing up in December. And so, anyway, he's been over for a number of weekends at our home back when we lived in Chicago because he was from out of town. So really got to know him well. And I learned that, and he understood, I had my 4 daughters and my wife. I'm excited, as he puts it, in a sense, because now I'm going to have an ally finally. Me and him. It won't
Another
be me
guy.
again. 5 women, another guy. So yeah.
The other connection we made.
Great guy. He adores my daughter. He's very serious about his faith and all
right.
of that. So
You
really,
realize you recognize that for the blessing that it is, and I pray the same for my daughters.
yeah.
We also made the connection that your dad, named David, was a longtime CRC pastor, and Pastor Drew here in Oostburg, his dad, also named David, was a longtime CRC pastor. So that's another funny coincidence.
Yeah. Nice.
I also mentioned that I graduated from Trinity Christian College, where your girls attend, and had a theology minor. So maybe some of the same professors. It's been longer than I realized some weeks since I've been out of there. But yeah, also really appreciated my time there. Anyways, we also made the connection that we're both NBA fans, and maybe that's not a conversation we need to rehash. But look out for Greg and I's NBA podcast on the side in the future.
Yeah. Oh, there was so much wisdom there in our first take.
It's all lost. Yeah.
We'll save it for another time.
Yeah, we'll do this again. But anyways, a long way of getting to the regular question, which is, what are you working on this week? So what text are you in? What's going on at First Waupun?
So I'm up to, in a Joshua sermon series, I'm up to Joshua 10 this week, and kind of looking at the theme of how in getting people to think about how big is your God, how great is your God. And in that chapter, that's the chapter where Joshua and the Israelites are fighting, and the coalition of southern Canaanite armies. They've gone from Jericho to Ai, and then last week we talked about the Gibeonites in that situation, who were part of the southern Canaanite kings and nations, but decided not to be part of that coalition. And in the context of that battle, God does a couple amazing things. He sends huge hailstones that, it says, more enemy soldiers were killed by the hailstones than by Israelite swords. Sort of an emphasis throughout the book that this is God's work and his duty. And then Joshua has seen so much of the mighty deeds of God, the miracle of the Jordan River crossing, Jericho, and others, that they need a little more time to finish off this portion of the conquest that God has for his people. And he dares ask for more daylight and basically for the sun to stand still. And the Bible is very, very straightforward.
Series since starting in Waupun?
Yes.
And how did you pick Joshua as a place to start?
Yeah. So Joshua that's a bit of a transition time for God's Old Testament people, Israel, in a number of ways. They're transitioning from the wilderness to a new place, Canaan, the land of promise, the land that God promised to Abraham and his descendants, but also a new leader after this longtime leader, Moses. Now God has chosen Joshua, first CRC, with the new pastor. It's a bit of a transition time. And more than it just being a transition time for first CRC and for God's people then, what I really liked about as I was kind of getting into Joshua and thinking about it going forward, that I thought would be really good as a pastor coming into the church is there's a lot in this transition time, and maybe it makes sense, a lot of God, a lot of God showing his people what faith in him is all about. So there's a lot of like building blocks, fundamentals, foundations of faith in the Lord that are true for God's people then and throughout all of time. Just as an example, in that first chapter, there's this emphasis on the importance of obeying God, listening to his word, and following him, and how in that there is, success, whatever that means for God's people.
Yeah.
And in that, the promises that his presence will go with his people. Do not be afraid, be courageous, and all of that. We get very clearly that what's happening is God's mission, it's God's plan. These victories are God's victories, not ours. We could never do that on our own, but it's all of him. Something really important there at the beginning that I think is important for the church today too is anyone who hears of God's mighty deeds and casts their lot, so to speak, with God's people can be saved. You sometimes think, in Joshua, and just talked about the southern armies being conquered, and it's kind of bloody and it's violent, and what's that all about? Well, the Bible makes pretty clear, and God makes pretty clear, you talk about, well, how could God's people do that? Well, one, it is the Old Testament. It's a different time in salvation history, but also these weren't just innocent ancient people. There was a lot of wickedness, child sacrifice to their false gods, witchcraft, and the fact is that any of these peoples could have turned to God at any time and been saved, but the vast majority didn't. Rahab did.
Yeah. She
said, I'm not going to go along with this because I see who the true God is, and decided to cast her lot with God's people. The Gibeonites did that in a different way in chapter 9. And so just the fact that, not just people who are biologically of Abraham and his descendants, like literally biologically Israel, can be saved, although God had his focus there at that time in salvation history on that. But already in this book and in other places in the Old Testament, of course, we see that other nations, other people can belong to the Lord by faith. And it's a foreshadowing of what's going to just be blown wide open when Jesus comes and Pentecost and the gospel goes everywhere to all nations. But there's hints, exciting hints and examples of that already here in Joshua 2. Anyone who believes.
Could be part of God's family. Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned the conquering and the killing and how that presents kind of a difficulty for some people who are reading the book of Joshua in particular. I heard that question answered by an apologist one time, was fielding questions at a college. And one student stood up and said, if there was really a God, why wouldn't he have put an end to the work of the Nazi Party in the Second World War? Why would he allow that to happen? And then another student got up right after and said, if there was really a God, why would he command the destruction of these nations in the Old Testament? And the apologist said, you're asking God to behave differently in the same situation. So should God destroy the evil nation or not? Right? So if these Old Testament Canaanites are killing children and they were playing music to drown out the cries so that the mothers wouldn't hear the children, I mean, just horrific things going on. Do you want God to put an end to that evil or not? So that that always stuck with me as a good way of thinking about that. Like,
Yeah.
What's happening in Joshua is not just God willy-nilly saying, well, kick these people out, I want that land.
Right.
It's not Jezebel taking a vineyard, right? It's a very different thing. The people who inhabit the land are evil, and they're doing atrocious things. And so God gives them a chance, like he does with Rahab. They can respond to his grace and his power that he's manifesting in each one of these conquests, as you mentioned, or they can remain apart from him where they desire to be. So,
yeah. I mean, those are tough questions, but
sure.
I think, I think what I really like what you said, and also there's a bit of a especially in this text that I'm looking at this week and in the conquering as a whole, it's God. Well, I think he talks about, sometimes they refer to these armies as a whole as the Amorites. And I can't remember which of the first 5 books of the Bible it is. It might be back in Genesis, actually, where he says something to Abraham about the land will be yours and your descendants when the iniquity of the Amorites comes to fulfillment. So there's right there, it's not like he does it right away. So it's a sign of his patience and long suffering. He doesn't, and that's true for us today too. He doesn't just, it's not immediate that he wipes you out for wickedness, but there was patience, there was time for them to turn, and again, some of them did. And also, there are also in sort of salvation history and redemptive history, there are unique time periods too that aren't necessary. There's similarities and differences, right, with the Old Testament and where we are today. And some people have talked about that as there's foreshadowing of salvation to all nations in Joshua. There's also foreshadowing of the end time destruction of the wicked. So like in this text in particular, the hailstones.
Oh, sure.
And that's mentioned like 3 times in Revelation at the very end of time. And the stars falling, stuff going on in the heavens and the sky, so the sun and the moon standing still.
Sure. Oh, wow.
So there's a bit of that, and I don't know how much I'm going to get into that in the message, but it's
That's
anyway.
Great. Yeah, really good. Well, I appreciate your time, Greg, and your extra time this week to make you do it twice. But last question is, how can we be praying for you and your church?
So we just celebrated in August our 100th, our centennial.
Wow.
Our 100-year anniversary.
Praise the
and
Lord.
That was wonderful. I'd only been there 2 months, but I got to celebrate it as the church's pastor with everybody else. And so we really gave thanks for God's faithfulness in past decades, had some former pastors come by and all of that. But really, as we look forward as a church, God has been so faithful to us in so many ways, too many to count. We just, as we move forward from that celebration, and as we want to, like I'm sure each one of you in your congregations as pastors, church members, God's faithful to us. We want to be as faithful to God as we can. And we have this mission statement of honoring God, serving others, transforming lives. where we really want to emphasize the importance of the proclamation of God's word, and worship together, caring for one another, but in all of that, being equipped to better and better serve and reach our neighbors and community. And one of the things I was really excited to come to First CRC about was that they're like, we want to do more outreach. And every church says that,
Sure.
right? We want to be equipped and supported and to be part of, want you to be part of that. But what was so exciting is that they've already been doing it before I came here.
Great.
So anyway, that we would be faithful in our mission in general, as God has been faithful to us. That would be my prayer. So I'm talking prayer for church more than personal prayer for me, although every pastor prayer for us personally too. But that we would be faithful to God going forward, especially as we really want to orient more towards our community and neighbors, because we're in a neighborhood. Church decided a number of years ago, should we build out a ways, a little more space? No, they wanted to stay in the neighborhood. We want to feel God's calling us to do more with that. So just prayers that we can continue to be faithful to God.
Right. Well, we will be praying for you and praying for First Waupun, and appreciate your time again, Greg. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Zach.